welcome to Astro 102. This is your host, the Peace Dealer, and we are going to be uncovering the mysteries of the Zodiac signs and the Zodiac. It's important that you have taken or seen Astro 101, which allowed us to meet the planets, indicating the significance of the luminaries and planets that travel through these signs. And in knowing these are representations of archetypes that these planets represent, it fills in more insight relative to what they do in the zodiac signs and houses. That being said, if you have taken or seen Astro 101, you are ready for the Astro 102 course, where we will, of course, enter the Zodiac. I'm definitely very excited about this course. I think some of the most important concepts will be covered in this course, so this will be lightly intensive, but not too complex. It will definitely be simple enough for you to gain these insights. And one thing I love about this course that actually gives me chills right now is once you are familiar with the basic concept of the zodiac signs, this enables you near immediately to begin speaking the language of astrology and noticing these patterns prevalent in your life with people, situations, circumstances, places, and things. All right. So for those of you who are excited to really kind of come into deeper insight, I'm going to reveal certain things that may not be as talked about as much and just revisit certain concepts to give them a more modern feel and spin, while honoring, of course, the history behind these interpretations. That being said, the first thing we must really get out the way is, what is the Zodiac? This has definitely, by experience or from experience, been in major contention. Many people who debunk, and I put that in quotes, astrology, seem to have an inability to properly define what the zodiac actually is, especially when discerning what is a sign versus what is a star grouping, which we will get into. So, to make this very simple, when we talk about the zodiac, we are actually talking about mathematical divisions that occur within an invisible space. How do we create this space? Well, as you can see this image right here, we see the sun. The sun is traveling across this orange band. This orange band is called the ecliptic. As you can see, the zodiac signs are around this ecliptic band. All right. This band is invisible. There's no line that you will see in space traveling here. But this one line alone grants astrology a soft and hard scientific status, given its consistency, predictability, and reliability. Reliability because we know the sun will faithfully travel along this ecliptic path every year, every season. And that's the significance of said ecliptic, because this ecliptic path that the sun travels, with which the earth revolves around the sun, intersects what? The earth's celestial equator, which you can see in these dashed lines. Okay, so the zodiac will represent the intersection between the sun's ecliptic path across this band and the earth's celestial equator. When these intersect, we create the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. As you know, these two tropics create the seasons. Here we see the vernal equinox. The vernal equinox, being Aries, represents the intersection between the sun's ecliptic and the Earth's equator, which creates equal day and equal night. This is not a constellation. This is an invisible space created by a mathematical division, a 360-degree band that is split between 30 degrees, 90 degrees marking each season. As we see through the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, we are given 4 major divisions that further split into 12. Of course, 3 in each season. In accounting for the intersection of these 2 bands and points and the subsequent creation of seasons, it's important to note that scientists have discovered the season you are born in affects your temperament, which is pretty much no different than saying the zodiac sign season you are born in will affect your personality and temperament. So that is a bit of the scientific credence around the accuracy and legitimacy of the zodiac. This is very important given that zodiac signs are frequently mistaken for constellations. All right. There is a difference between zodiac signs and visible star groupings that we call constellations. So as I have shown you in this slide, Aries is Aries, not because when the sun is at this point on the ecliptic, it is in the constellation of Aries. That is not why it's Aries season. In fact, when the sun is at this point in the ecliptic, the sun is actually in the constellation of Pisces due to the precession of the equinoxes. The reason why it's Aries season is because during this period, faithfully, every year, we have equal day and equal night. This gives us, once again, a 360-degree invisible band of a seasonal progress that we can mark predictably, knowing that once we reach the summer solstice in Cancer, we're going to have the most day and the least night, relative to Capricorn, where we're going to have the most night and the least day. That being said, given that the constellations are more physical groupings, which are not equal to 30 degrees because they're not meant to be, the zodiac signs were named after the constellations, but they are not constellations. All right. Once again, you can see constellations in the sky. You cannot see zodiac signs. They must be mathematically calculated. Now that we've gotten this very important introduction out the way, which is very important because knowing this will help you navigate those who have no experience reading natal charts. They cannot tell you what the significance between the intersection of the sun's ecliptic and the Earth's equator are. These people have no authority or appeal to a false authority in mistaking these 2 concepts. Sidereal astrologers will usually go more based off of constellations. As a quote unquote Western astrologer, we honor the 360-degree ecliptic math, which makes this more consistent and aligned with real-time calculations of the sun's position. And with that being said, let's get to the fun part. I welcome you to Astro 102, where we will be breaking down the zodiac signs, these mathematical divisions. Aries at 0 degrees, Cancer 90 degrees, Libra is 180 degrees, Capricorn is 270 to 300 degrees, 300 where Aquarius starts, 330 where Pisces starts, back to 0, 0 to 30, Aries. If you're able to really understand these zodiac signs as these degree placements, what degrees each are, this will also further simplify this, but we could save that for a more advanced course. In this course, we will be, of course, uncovering the nature of zodiac signs, with which have 3 modalities, aka Cardinal, Fixed, and Mutable. We're going to talk about the 4 elements of the zodiac: fire, earth, air, and water. We're going to talk about the 3 perspectives. This is my personal favorite, and upon learning this, transformed the way I look at astrology and see this in real people, circumstances, pets, whatever you want to know, call it. 3 perspectives. We have the first 4 signs, which are the individual signs. Then we have the next 4 signs from Leo to Scorpio, which are the social signs. And then, of course, we have the final 4, which are the universal signs. If you notice with these 3 perspectives, they all have each of the elemental sets. The individuals have fire to water. The socials have fire, earth, air, water. The universals have fire, earth, air, water. Then we have, of course, the 4 seasons, which represent 4 different quadrants. We have the activation, spring season. We have the summer season. We have the fall season. And then we have winter. We have 2 hemispheres. We have both the Western hemisphere from Cancer to Gemini, the Eastern hemisphere from Cancer to Sag, right? Then we also have the Northern hemisphere, the top of the chart, the last 6 zodiac signs, and the Southern, the first 6, all right? And when we integrate all of these, it creates one truth. Because in truly reading a natal chart and reading the zodiac, we're meant to read all of it as it correlates into one. No one person is a Libra. No one person is an Aries. We will say this semantically and idiomatically in order to save time and to say things quicker in abbreviated form, but you are not a zodiac sign. You represent the composite combination and balance of all of these facets, energies, powers, perspectives. That being said, let's get straight into the modalities. Of course, zodiac signs have 3 main modalities. We have the cardinal signs, which are represented by Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. We have the fixed signs, which I call the royals, representing Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And finally, we have the mutable signs, representing Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Understanding astrological modalities is a must. This is one of the basic principles that will set you apart from one who just peruses and understands signs in a pop culture way versus one who actually knows what they're talking about, versus one who actually studies the nature of these signs to see their effects or quality or power expressed through anything really that has a pulse, that has a soul. And in understanding the modality of a zodiac sign, it gives you very crucial insight into the nature of what may be done, what may happen, or the quality of said experience, or whatever it is, once again, you are observing. And in understanding these modalities, you can come into a very profound level of insight with just this basic concept alone, especially when you're analyzing transit charts and you want to get a feel of what that aspect in transit is telling you. This is what has us begin with the cardinal signs. The cardinal signs in astrology represent potency and power. Cardinal signs start out the seasons that we experience every year. So Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. Aries is the beginning of spring. Cancer is the beginning of summer. Libra is the beginning of fall. Capricorn is the beginning of winter. These represent the primary cause that pushes forward anything In this case, one's character. As we will in 103 look over the houses and how this creates the angular houses, cardinal signs will really dictate the nature of action that carves out and develops one's character. And as such also represents drive through this nature. So when we're looking at analyzing or viewing types of power, this is what cardinal signs represent. And starting with the very first and premier cardinal sign, we have the archetype of the warrior. Aries, in its representation of the warrior, is the primary cause that, of course, sparks this path along the ecliptic at 0 degrees. It is expressly the one, representing that individuality. Oh, I like that. Individuality. I like that. Individuality, as we, of course, will mention in the perspectives. This is the divine spark that is produced after the belief of Pisces and is going to represent authenticity. Of course, then we have the specialist, where Cancer, the next cardinal sign, is going to represent psychic power. To Aries, which is going to be more raw and individual physical power. We will talk more about the nuances of this when we get to the elements. As you'll see, each of these cardinal signs are really just separated by their different elements. But of course, whereas Aries is the one, Cancer is going to be the truth. Aries is going to represent raw movement forward towards the original development of your character and your instinctual actions. Cancer is going to represent psychic power through the cardinal function of your feelings, the action of emoting, hence energy emotion, making this very empathic. If Aries is the one, Cancer is the juice. And relative to the flavor of Aries, with which seeks authenticity or freedom through authenticity, Cancer will express sincerity, actually meaning what one feels and says relative to that. Then we have the artist, archetypalized by the zodiac sign Libra. And this is where, once we get into elements and perspectives, you will see more nuances in the difference of these cardinal signs. However, of course, Aries, which is more explosive and raw, will contrast to Libra, which is intelligent and classy. This post Virgo will represent the perfect balance, hence the scales. And Libra is the archetype of the classic, doing something justice, as well as fighting for fairness and justice. Given that this will represent the cardinal action of expressing one's mind and communicating, it will influence the bridging of relationships and agreements that allow you to move forward with other people, even if this is yourself as an inter or intrapersonal relationship you are developing. And of course, we have the director, represented by Capricorn. This final point and cardinal sign will represent all power. And unlike Aries, which is raw and instinctual, Capricorn represents organization, hence represented with the archetype as the GOAT, the greatest of all time. This sign that, relative to its house, speaks of your legacy and accomplishments. If Aries is authenticity, Cancer is sincerity, Libra is altruism and justice, well, Capricorn is going to be expressed through integrity. And in really discerning these four powers and forces, they represent the different directions or states of directions we simultaneously activate in, of course, taking any kind of action. So these signs will really once again, go more into the nature of these actions, bringing us to the fixed signs. We know that cardinal signs represent power. Well, what do we know about power? When you turn on the fan, that power generated by turning it on generates energy. And so the cause and potency of cardinal signs manifest fixed signs. Fixed signs now representing the quality of power and energy generated. And so whereas cardinal signs are going to focus more on the force and cause behind something, fixed signs are going to focus on the quality of strength and energy, and thus will represent how strong something is, how valuable something is, the quality of energy. And as such, the cardinal signs being powers is going to be contrasted by the fixed signs being royalty. And we will see 4 different aspects of royalty, or you can say currency, relative to what the fixed signs represent. Starting, of course, with the Zodiac sign, Taurus, the first fixed sign. Taurus is going to be the producer. And given its quality, it is of solid and natural quality, physical quality. This is going to represent value. Value that builds relative to appreciation, both in appreciating how you feel about someone, but also in seeing the value of a car quite literally appreciate or depreciate. Taurus will now represent natural royalty. The natural royalty that comes from being self-made. Then we have, of course, Leo, archetypalized as the lead role. If Taurus is the producer who bankrolled this production, Leo is the lead role who was casted to, of course, be the main character. This level of royalty is called solar royalty or light royalty. All right. The kings and queens of awesome. Hence, the currency of Leo is passion, the ability to rev up joy, fun, and heat. So the quality of Taurus representing love will now be extended in Leo, or the quality of Taurus representing value will extend in Leo as love through courage. And as Taurus is the natural, we like to call Leo the plug. If you think when you plug in a device into an outlet, it is going to tap into a source energy. Leo is a great archetypalization of source energy, given its rulership being the sun, with which every other planet revolves around, and is our main light source of the whole solar system. This is what brings us to the secret, aka Scorpio. Scorpio now takes us so much deeper into pure quality relative to what is hidden underground. The unconsciousness of one's psyche that reveals wisdom through experience, and as such is the transformer. This wisdom is gained through intimacy. And so the currency that Scorpio represents is wisdom and purity. Whereas Taurus is going to look at the quality of how natural and strong something is. And Leo's going to look at the quality of how passionate and joyful something is, or spiritually strong. Taurus is going to be a more natural physical strength. Leo is going to be a more courageous spiritual strength to stand in the face of fear. And Scorpio is going to be a much more deeply psychological strength, testing the quality of purity and wisdom. If you think these are the pure royals, the pure king, the pure queen of the underworld, of the underground, diamonds, treasures buried underground that need to be excavated, leading us to the final form of currency. And the most valuable form of currency, which is friendship. You have the narrator. Aquarius is who narrated the play that Taurus produced and will represent extraordinary quality of strength, the highest octave of strength being knowledge here. So whereas Taurus is going to look at more physically the quality of maybe a purse or a physical product, Aquarius is going to look more into the quality of one's knowledge in representing the mind. This is now the celestial, who is supernatural to Taurus's natural energy. Hence, it being extraordinary in nature. Next, after, of course, the cardinal and fixed signs, we have the mutable signs. Mutable zodiac signs represent the end of a season, as opposed to the cardinal signs that represent the beginning of a season and the fixed signs that represent the middle of every season. Gemini, which will close out spring, Virgo, which closes out summer, Sagittarius, which closes out the fall, and of course Pisces, which closes out the winter. Mutable signs, unlike cardinal that represents power and force, and fixed that represents strength and quality, will represent perception and change. This is the magic of the zodiac, and given its changeable nature, allows for flexibility. This is what enables one through this changeable and adjustable zodiac sign to form abilities and techniques. So given the nature of the mutable signs that end a season, which provide perspective in order to review the actions we took during cardinal sign seasons, and the strengthened quality we generated from that force, allows us the perception to not only change our perception, but what happens after mutable signs, we have a cardinal sign. So the perception in review that allows us to perceive and come into the right perspective will be now the direction we take. You could look at a mutable sign as adjusting the direction you sail a ship before that cardinal sign season comes and you move in that direction that the mutable sign had shifted. Of course, we start with the messenger, Gemini, representing the aspect of truth, answering the question, what? What is the truth? Messengers are angels, as angel means messenger of God. And this expresses itself through enlightenment. If you think the individual thought that enlightens you and inspires you out of Plato's cave. And so the expression of Gemini as a zodiac sign is being smart. This segues into mastery of Virgo. Given the nature of Gemini that will communicate the thoughts, Virgo will criticize these thoughts and analyze what about them is factual. And so whereas Gemini will have the signature of enlightenment, Virgo has the signature of perfection and mastery. Gemini is smart, Virgo is competent. And whereas Gemini focuses on the truth, Virgo focuses on facts. The critical perspective relative to if Gemini is what is the truth, Virgo is, well, how is it true? The experimentation of Gemini and the analysis of Virgo leads to the interpretation of Sagittarius. We, of course, gain data through experimentation. We analyze that data through critique, and then we interpret the meaning of that analysis. Hence, Sagittarius representing the creator. This is a wild, chaotic perspective that shows one the meaning of an experience. So whereas Gemini is the word in the dictionary, Sagittarius is going to be the meaning of that word. And whereas this represents enlightenment in Gemini, it will represent ascension into a higher plane of perspective, seeing from the higher mind, aka your mind's eye. And they, of course, will represent the wild card, which can be quite literally anything. This leads us to the final perspective, which if Gemini answers what is the truth, and Virgo answers how is it true, and Sagittarius answers what does that truth mean? Well, Pisces gives us the divine understanding of why it is true in the first place. This is the beyonder, the ascended master that past the ascension of Sagittarius takes one beyond the physical and transcends one beyond current meaning. If you think about this as the scientific method, we experiment, we analyze, we interpret that data, and then we come into a reasoning, a belief with which we go back to experiment again. And this is how this mutable train keeps on moving forward. Pisces, given its metaphysical implications, opposite Virgo of the physical, which is going to break everything down, we'll see how every individual part is connected into an interrelated whole. And that being said, that concludes the first part of the zodiac signs. We have covered the astrological modalities, and now we will move on to the astrological elements. Now that we have covered the astrological states, it is time for us to venture and uncover the significance of the elements, which is where things get even more fun, to be honest. In describing the states, I made sure not to describe their elemental nature so that we could do this here. That being said, now that we've covered the states, I will reference how each element, of course, differs based on state. And if you were only aware of the states and the elements, that would still be more than enough ample information to begin discerning how you experience these astrological zodiac sign expressions. It wouldn't be the full picture, but I mean, it'd be a large percentage of it. Anyway, we see as there are 3 modalities, we have 4 elements: fire, water, earth, and air. I watch a lot of anime, so I like to call these the fire benders, the water benders, the earth benders, and the air benders. Especially when you interpret natal charts, seeing what elemental is dominant in one's chart lets you know what element they bend, especially the sun sign, which will, of course, attribute one's elemental affinity. But of course, we will get into natal chart analysis coming into Astro 105. That being said, the fire element, which kicks off the order of the zodiac, is going to be a lot more passionate, and it's going to be hot. All right, fire burns everything to a crisp and cinder. And then in order, we do have earth that comes after fire. The earth, which, grounds after the wildfire that burned everything down, will represent a more grounded and materialistic nature, one that is both tangible and practical, especially considering the dimension with which we're aware of in our bodies is physical. Another way to look at this is fire element will represent your spirit, and the earth element will represent your body and physical senses through Taurus. Then we have the air element, air, which is going to be, of course, more intellectual. The air element is going to correspond to your mind and the way with which you communicate the passion and groundedness within you. This will account for a more detached nature that will definitely be somewhat objective like Earth, but leaning more towards intellectual logic. Leaving the final element, water, which is illogical, emotional, irrational, but also very, very nurturing, very sensitive, as opposed to air, which could be very insensitive. And the more you play with these definitions through your own experience, the more fun you can have really integrating this as you apply it in your experiences with said elements. Anyway, that being said, let us begin with the fire signs. As we have mentioned before, fire is going to represent the expression of your life force in its passionate and somewhat spiritual and vibrant nature. And that begins us with, once again, just like the first cardinal sign, the first fire sign. So what differentiates Aries from the rest of the other two fire signs? We have 4 elements, and each element, of course, has 3 zodiac signs. Each of the 3 zodiac signs in an element are split by their modality. So as far as the fire signs, we have the cardinal fire, we have the fixed fire, and we have the mutable fire. Aries is cardinal fire. It is the spark of originality. Given its cardinal nature, it's going to represent the actual inspiration. Although all 3 fire signs are inspiring, this is going to be the force that has caused this. Hence its instinctual nature. Aries, given its fire power, will speak towards the force with which, once again, as I've repeatedly said, can not only spark, but once again also originate anything relative to the action that it spawns and produces. Then, of course, we have Leo. Leo being the fixed royal fire sign. If Aries is the spark, Leo is the glow. And I like the bonfire picture used to express this, because Leo, which we will speak on more with the perspective, is a social zodiac sign. So given its fixed nature, you see that this fire is fixed, surrounded by earth, and surrounded by people who are socializing around this fire. So whereas Aries is going to be the cardinal force of originality, Leo is going to be the fixed quality of courage and creativity. This, of course, now leads us to the wildfire that is dangerous Sagittarius. Could you imagine dating someone born Sagittarius who will burn your house down? Jokes aside, Sagittarius is the shining light. So if Aries is the action of sparking that fire, and then Leo is the quality of that fire that glows, well, Sagittarius is the experience of that fire. Obviously, what does fire do? It casts light. So your ability to see and perceive the light, feel the warmth, feel the burning of your skin, being burned alive, which is like being with any Sagittarius. This is the mutable fire, which will represent ascension, and by its very nature is wild. That being said, as we go into the earth signs, we shift gears into a much more grounded, methodical, and keyword sensual element. The passion of fire now becomes organized with the condensed and slowed down vibration of such an element. This is what starts us off with the fixed earth sign, which I do have as a rock. Think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who was also born Taurus season, because Taurus, if anything, would be a rock type Pokemon. Taurus, as a fixed earth sign, is the grounded, solid level of value with which one stands upon, and can represent your potential to manifest based off of what you value and based off of what you're worth. Taurus, as the first earth sign, as we will mention in its perspective, has much to do with one's individual value. But then we have the shifting sands of Virgo, which is, of course, mutable. Taurus, which will be solid, will now, with the mutable earth sign, represent critical perspectives and, as such, mastery. So whereas Taurus manifests, Virgo is the analyzing perspective. Taurus, with which can be seen as your product, well, Virgo is the market where we buy and sell. And if Virgo is the market, then trust and believe that Capricorn is the economy, the economic system. Taurus manifests or has value. Virgo analyzes, and as such, the cardinal earth sign decides. Capricorn represents decisive power as well as time, and is the signature of integrity. The cardinal action of actually organizing post-analysis, as Capricorn does come after Virgo, is going to be represented by the goat. Next, we have the air signs. Air signs are intellectual, objective, impartial, rule communication, and are as expressly detached. Unlike fire signs that will get very passionate over things, even if for just 5 seconds. And water signs, which we will speak on, that will be very sensitive emotionally about things. Air signs are maybe sometimes too insensitive, but are able to detach and perceive and take action based on things intellectually and objectively. Starting, of course, with the mutable air sign everyone loves to hate, Gemini. All right, Gemini is the mutable air sign that represents the experience of thinking. I think, therefore I am. It expresses brilliance through the enlightenment, as thoughts can lead you out of Plato's cave. Thinking in generating questions that need more answers. So the whole mutable nature of having multiple thoughts and being able to communicate these individual thoughts will be represented by Gemini. But then, of course, we have to bridge those thoughts. Otherwise, we'll just be talking to ourselves all day. And even in the act of talking to yourself, now you, in a sense, are intrapersonally and interpersonally interfacing your own self as someone you're connecting with, which will be represented by Libra, the cardinal air sign, the power of air, as opposed to Gemini's magic or perception of air. So the power of air represents classic justice, doing something justice, putting out a classic. Libra is going to be the cardinal force of balance, the scales with which enforce justice. And unlike Aries, that's going to be a lot more individual in its seeming selfishness, Libra is cooperative and altruistic in nature. This, of course, now leads to the energy of air, the fixed air, Aquarius. Fixed air is knowledge. If you think the words in a book are fixed on that page, the ideas that were Gemini have now been fixed on, of course, a thought process, which is all a part of a knowing. And this is represented through friendship, the quality, of course, of Aquarius as the fixed element of air, being not only extraordinary, but celestial, supernatural, and advanced. Last but not least, we have the water signs. The water signs of which are not only compassionate and deep, but do represent occult/hidden aspects of our own unconscious. Water, which to me is a sacred class, given that we are made up of majority of water through our blood, and will represent the soul essence that allows one to feel and become emotional. That, of course, kicks off the cardinal water sign, Cancer, which through the cardinal function of feeling allows you to feel emotions. And the signature of this cardinal water sign will be expressed through sincerity. When we share how we really feel, we are being sincere. Sincerity opens way to be empathic and really understand how maybe other people may feel as well. This now leads to the fixed air sign. And if you notice, I made sure to use the different states of liquids to represent water signs. Cancer being fluid liquid, and Scorpio, the fixed water sign, being ice, ice, ice. Because Scorpio is easily the coldest zodiac sign in the zodiac. Despite allusions to them being the fire of water, given their passionate nature, they can also easily be as cold like an ice cube, representing the wisdom of one's unconscious through experience. And whereas Cancer is going to be the holy power of water, Scorpio is going to be the purification in its intensity and pure quality, expressed through the function of transformation, just like a fluid will transform into a solid. And finally, mutable water, which is going to represent gas. Pisces, the magic of water, is going to be transcendent, as it now, of course, transcends beyond the physical. And whereas Cancer is holy and Scorpio is pure, Pisces accordingly is divine and will be expressed through the function of belief and faith in that which is unseen, but also belief that comes after Aquarius of knowledge, and after Virgo of analysis, where I've analyzed this, we know it to be true, and based on that, we can believe this will happen. And that, in a nutshell, concludes the portion of the 4 astrological elements. Next, we will move on to what may be one of my favorite facets of the zodiac signs. I personally learned about this studying astropsychology from Glenn Perry, and it was the first time that I was even introduced to this concept, which, I mean, was years after I originally started studying astrology. So understanding just this one concept alone, in conjunction with modalities and elements, seriously upgraded my understanding of zodiac signs and helped me understand psychologically why certain people seem more extroverted or more introverted. Perspectives are not introversion and extroversion, by the way, but it definitely is one of the most notable facets of understanding the perspective a zodiac sign represents, and people who have these dominant in their chart will play out predictably. All right. That being said, these are the 3 astrological perspectives. You have 3 different perspectives, similar to having 3 modalities. And just like the 3 modalities, there are 4 signs in each. Okay. So relative to what we've just learned, we know we have the fire signs, the earth signs, the air signs, and we have the water signs. Okay. We know that we have the cardinal signs, we have the mutable signs, and we have the fixed signs. So the first 4 zodiac signs are going to be the individual zodiac signs. In a future class, we will cover age development and how this actually ties in to the age you develop. When, for example, Aries is going to be 0 to 2. Leo is going to be 12 to 22. Aries is the first individual sign. Leo is the first social sign where you start to develop your character outside the influence of your parents after you grow out of the homebody Cancer. So the first 4 zodiac signs represent your individuality. The next 4 zodiac signs represent the social integration of your individuality. And the last 4 zodiac signs will represent the collective, aka universal completion of your individuality and the relation you as an individual have with the rest of the world post integration, post social integration. I like to call the individuals the originals. I like to call the socials the supers. All right. And I like to call the collectives the gods. That being said, when we examine individuals, this is a very important facet because you are not a zodiac sign. Once again, even if you have an empty zodiac sign in your chart, it is still a part of your makeup. It still falls in a house, houses with which we'll go over Astro 103. So everyone is an individual. Everyone has the ability to integrate their individuality socially, and everyone has a universal sense of themselves. All right. They are all part of a collective. So the individual signs will represent, of course, your capacity to understand and be aware of yourself as an individual. Individuals, unlike the other perspectives, move around solo like an individual. As we will go into nuances in advanced classes, there's ways with which we can combine these. So, for example, a Leo moon with an Aries sun is who I would call a social individual, because the social quality of their Leo moon and soul is going to aid into the individual awareness of them as an individual warrior. So unlike other individuals, they are an individual who feels the need to integrate that individuality social. By contrast, you can have a Leo sun with an Aries moon. I would call that an individual super, an individual social spirit. All right. And once you start combining this, oh my God, it gets so fun. And there's certain archetypes with which I'll go in future World War Z episodes, so that with real life examples to show you what this looks like. The first premier individual, of course, is Aries. Aries of the I am is going to represent your capacity to take instinctual, character driven actions and to define who you are, once again, through these actions. What's very key here is people who have a lot of planets in individual signs are a lot more aware of who they are versus those who don't. Okay. And maybe through other people, they come into this insight. Taurus is going to represent your individual worth and value. So you have the individual conception of who you are in spirit, and then you have your individual values. Everything that constitutes what you have and what you value individually is going to be represented by Taurus. So Aries is going to represent I am him, I am her. Taurus is going to represent I have $50,000 in my bank account. I have a green pen. I value loyalty, right? And then the individuality of who you are and what you have helps lead to what thoughts are produced from this. And this is where things get even spicier or more brilliant here, because now I think, right? Aries is I am. Taurus is I have. Gemini is I think. So now you're going to have a myriad of thoughts, but the individuality of these thoughts are the expression and attitude of who you are, and the quality of these values. Obviously, the nature of your thoughts is going to be influenced by the quality of what you value, consciously or unconsciously. So we, of course, now have this point of enlightenment through your ability to think and play with your ideas. And that leads us to the final individual sign, one of the most important signs, as much as I don't like to admit this. Cancer, I feel, okay, the emotional expression that brings together who you are, what you have, what you think, and begins to integrate this as an individual feeling. Okay. And now through these feelings, you get to understand who you are much more. Now, as we step into the social zodiac signs, what I want you to understand is just like the individuals, it starts with fire, then there's earth, then there's air, then there's water. So the socials now take what we've activated individually and they begin to integrate this socially. Archetypally, for example, as this isn't the most uncommon, but it's not common as much either, I personally do not have any planets in these social signs. I have Pluto in Scorpio, which is generational, and I have the South Node in Leo. Outside of the Pars of Fortune in Libra, all my social planets are empty. Does that mean that I'm not meant to socialize? No, whenever I go out in social spaces, before I used to be shy, as soon as my Mercury progressed in a Leo, I lean more into, connecting, but I don't have any desire to be social. This is why, compared to others who have heavy social planets, you won't necessarily see me socialize as much. You won't necessarily see me out as much. Now, this isn't a way with which I will blame astrology on this. Like, I'm not social because I don't have any social planets. The nature of planets in a sign show us our focus of desire. I have more of a majority of my planets in collective and individual signs. So I have more of a focus and awareness and desire to be by myself versus people who have more planets in social signs who you will see them cooperate with others. It's almost as if they can't do things without other people. And those people may lack individual planets. This is why I love this delineation, because it shows you where people focus their perspective. And whereas the individuals now activate one's individuality, I call the socials the supers because they now integrate the next level of development. So whereas Taurus is going to be natural strength, Leo is super strength. The super strength that comes from the courage of one's passion. So we had the first individual sign, which was Aries, and then we have the first social sign, which is Leo, hence making fire first class. Leo is going to integrate the first four signs, take your individuality and perform it on stage where there is an audience seeing what Leo represents, your talents. Then, of course, we have the social earth sign, Virgo. This is important because, one, if Taurus is going to represent your individual value, Virgo is going to be you taking it into the market and bartering it. Hey, this is worth $50. And the buyer is like, I'm only paying 40 for that. And now you as the seller, you're like, well, 45 or I'm out of here. And then we have the agreement in Libra, deal. Okay. So the mutable earth sign of Virgo is going to be the second social sign. This is where we take our individual ideas, and if you notice, Virgo will make a 90-degree angle to Gemini that challenges how, right? Gemini answers what? Well, Virgo answers, how do we take our individual ideas and through connecting with other people socially with individual ideas, we can flesh out what about that is real. What through this analysis and critique, how these thoughts actually integrate in real life. And that's what leads us to the social air sign. If Leo is super strength and Virgo is super analysis, Libra is a superpower. The fulfillment of your individuality, fully bridged and balanced towards expressing with others. And now making agreements, because this is an individual. And this is an individual, but both of these I am individuals have made an agreement, okay, with which to balance both of their individuality. Very key here. Very key here. The social air sign. And then we have the social water sign, the second aspect of super strength. Whereas Leo is going to be a passionate super strength in the form of courage that has you step up to a lion or be a lion. Scorpio is going to be a more psychological super strength with which can brave cold elements in an ice bath and not necessarily be afraid or not necessarily crumble under the weight of that pressure. I like to think of Leo as the daytime social where you go out after Cancer, and then Scorpio is at the end of the night after the club where, you know, you bump uglies. This is a point of trust and intimacy. And it's very interesting because many people stereotypically look at Scorpio and Virgo, who is the hermit, by the way, as introverts. And this is a good sign to show that whether you could be introverted and still social. I'm not going to say that Scorpio and Virgo is introverted. There's zodiac signs. So you could meet Virgos and Scorpios who are introverted and extroverted. And there's no such thing as a Virgo person or a Scorpio person, but, you know, idiomatically, just to save time. That being said, Scorpio, just like Cancer, ends off each perspective. So Cancer is the final individual sign, and Scorpio is the final social sign that transforms us into the level and realm of the gods, the collectives. All right. And this represents the final 4 zodiac signs. So after we've integrated our individuality socially, we're ready to break through and ascend into the greater universe, even if figuratively in our minds. All right. So whereas the first individual sign is Aries and the first social sign is Leo, the first collective or universal sign is Sagittarius, the gods on Mount Olympus. People who have a lot of collective planets in their charts, you can consider them super social, but they're not necessary. Not all collectives are social. All right. Collective is going to really represent to those who are able to travel and connect to varying social spheres. They're going to look at everything as it connects as one. So instead of just kind of focusing individually one-on-one like individuals do, or connecting with the whole social group like a social does, collectives are going to really keep into account everything in this universal push. So we do have the God perspective, the first of the 2 God perspectives, Sagittarius, which is the opposite to Gemini's individual thought. All right. And Virgo's analysis, which will now interpret the higher meaning, the philosophical meaning that helps create a way of life. Think about the influence of philosophies and religions and how they have spread throughout the entire world. Hence, Gemini, which is going to be the individual that explores their neighborhood, will be opposite Sagittarius that's going to travel across the world, thus expanding their horizon. Then we have Capricorn, which is going to be the collective representation of authority through, in this example, representatives. Each one of these representatives have the responsibility to represent thousands of individuals, hundreds of different social groups. And that's what Capricorn represents as a God level or universal power. The integrity of decision making that affects literally millions. And then we have Aquarius. Aquarius is going to be that humanitarian. It is the collective air sign, the knowledge that enables one to apply, of course, the performance socially in Leo in knowing the audience. And everyone who has come together from all different works and lives, all different individuals, all different social groups, to, of course, represent one humanity, one collective. Aquarius will also represent the universe itself and a vibration or frequency that is out of this world as we come into the last two signs. And finally, we have collective water, Pisces, which is beyond everything physical. Pisces is going to be the collective belief. All right. So if you think of Aquarius, where, you know, what we know as a people is really just the collectively set upon agreed principles. So it's not even like we know it. It's just at this point in time, all of us agree that this is what we know. And that requires collective effort, whether due to analysis that sharpens this to make this strong until something new is discovered that transforms this. And that's what produces a belief, a collective illusion, delusion, belief, the legend of the collective. So Pisces is the final sign and the universal water sign. Now attempts to restart the wheel by returning back to Aries relative to your relation to what everyone and yourself believes about yourself. All right. And there's so much more that could be said about this, but in the interest of time, I do want to just get that out of the way. All right. In conclusion, we're going to get into a few more modalities, a couple more. These should not be slept on because they give us a lot more insight into how to further divide the nature of the zodiac. And of course, one of the most important are these quadrants, the seasons. All right. In understanding these quadrants, you can also apply them towards cycles where, of course, the spring season of Aries, Taurus, and Gemini will represent activation. This is where we activate who we are in Aries, what we're worth, and what we think. All right. This also, in representing this spring season, will also influence temperament of people born during these seasons. Then we have the integration arc, summer, Cancer, Leo, and Virgo. We integrate what we feel, all right, what the talent is, and how we put it together. Then we have the fall quadrant of Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. After we've sown our seeds in spring, or with the activation quadrant, and then we began to break those seeds through the ground and integrate them, we now harvest those seeds from Libra, Scorpio, and Sag. Libra, which will begin the breakthrough of taking who we are and presenting it towards others. Scorpio is transforming the quality of that as we take what we have and then we share it with others. And then Sagittarius as breaking free into the higher meaning of everything we've activated and integrated. This now completes the cycle in winter. And what do you think we do during this period? We have Christmas, we have holidays that reflect and review in the year beforehand. So the winter quadrant is going to be Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, the elites. All right. The final collective signs. This will be completion. What I want you to keep in mind is relative to the previous deviations, we see how the first four elements where Cancer is here, the last of these four is a part of the next quadrant, right? And you do see a bit of a blending here. Like we will see, of course, Sagittarius be the last part of the fall quadrant while also being the first part of the universal signs. So it gives you just more nuances in how to really understand how all of these come together accordingly. All right. And, of course, you could also take into account the fixed stars, the four archangel stars, where we're going to have Aldebaran in the Gemini Taurus region, right? But mainly like 8 degrees Gemini, watcher of the East. We're going to have Uriel in the 8 degrees Sagittarius region, watcher of the West. Then we're going to have Raphael at the end of Leo, beginning of Virgo. And we're going to have Gabriel at like 8 degrees Pisces. So it's another way to kind of look at how they used to mark the equinoxes and solstices. And we finally have the astrological hemispheres. All right. This is something that also really helps when archetypalizing one's psychology and where they really focus their energy. We have the southern hemisphere, which is going to cover the first 6 zodiac signs: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and Virgo. We have the northern hemisphere, which is going to cover the last 6 zodiac signs: Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Then we have the eastern quadrant, which is going to cover everywhere from Capricorn, Aqua, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. And then we have the western, which is going to cover Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sag. One thing to keep in mind, and I would like for you to test this and see if you notice this in your reality. Those who have a majority of planets in the southern hemisphere are going to be more focused on their, let's say, personal lives. All right. How things happen personally to them, what they're going through privately, and could really, really maintain more private people. Now, that doesn't mean that these are the only people who are private, because there's so many different combinations. But the northern hemisphere people with Libra to Pisces are going to be more focused on what's happening outside in the world. All right. And what's happening outside or beyond them. Then we have the eastern hemisphere. Eastern hemisphere, people on the east from Capricorn to Gemini are going to be a lot more focused personally towards their own identity. They're going to be more selfish, more self-centered, not in a negative way, but they're just going to focus more on themselves. Versus the Western hemisphere from Cancer to Sag are going to focus more on other people. And when you combine both of these hemispheres, like someone who is more southern and western, they could be more privately centered towards others, versus someone who's more eastern and northern. They could be more personally focused towards what's happening out in the world. This isn't necessarily set in stone, because everyone has an infinite combination of these, and you do progress them as you grow older. But by golly, yes, I just said by golly, it is a very amazing way to really kind of understand these things. And in going back to the perspectives, this is what helped me understand why certain people are social and certain people are antisocial. We know that the 4 social signs are going to be Leo, Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio. So what is opposite those 4 signs? Aqua, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. And since those previous 4 are social, Aqua, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus are antisocial or asocial. They have the most proclivity to being anti and asocial. And when you now research, criminals or people in history who have known to be accused of having these traits, they have these signs. That doesn't mean that you won't find a Libra social who isn't asocial, right? But oh my goodness, it definitely simplifies the process, and it gives you more of an entry point of where to analyze and how to understand. So now that we have uncovered all these facets, all of this leads into one astrological truth. Let us recap all of this once again. With the zodiac signs, we've covered the 3 modalities, we've covered the 4 elements, we've covered the 3 perspectives, we've covered the 4 seasons, and we've covered the 2 hemispheres. All right. All of this is going to account for one astrological truth, the reflection of how in your chart, all of these combining factors make up who you are and where you're progressing with it. I like to end it on this note because sometimes we can get so caught up in the illusion of separation that we break down all these points. Oh, you're a Cancer. Oh, you're a Scorpio. Oh, I have this and this planet, when all of these make one interrelated whole. You want to look at how they, of course, connect separately, but for the purpose of integrating it all together and looking at it all together. And I hope in this Astro 102 course, you have taken these principles and will move forward to apply them, because I have just given you a cheat code. I'm going to be completely honest. Just with the basics. Take your time to really study and practice this, and it will always pay off. Just knowing this alone will not give you everything to know about astrology, but it'll definitely brush you up on the basics of astrology signs. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. You stay blessed as always, and until next time, peace.